I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Justine Bateman, who makes her feature directorial debut with Violet, which she also wrote and which stars Olivia Munn with Bracey and Justin Theroux. Justine, I was telling you offline that this film really resonated with me, and I think it resonates with a lot of people because it's something that's quite universal. It explores, crippling anxiety and how fear of failure holds you back. Why did you choose to tackle this story as your first film?
Well, I've written a lot of scripts that I hope I can, get to, make them all. And I guess I was like, okay, what's going to be my first film? If the world ended, a year after I made my first film, like what film do I want to make sure I get out there? It's kind of like a decision like that. I was like, well, I want to be sure this gets out there, because years ago I made a lot of fear-based decisions. And once I found like a map to get from living that kind of life to a life that's more instinct-based, I really wanted to pass that map on to others. Because I wish I had had this map back then, years ago.
Yeah. So what particularly resonates with you personally about, this living in fear and being more instinct-based? Talk us through that.
Sure. Well, when I was making fear-based decisions, I just knew I wasn't being myself. I didn't feel on track. I didn't feel, I was worried about what people were thinking of me, and, and making decisions that were not what I really wanted to do, but more so, I had to, for me, it's journaling and talking to people sometimes, but mostly journaling and try and get to the core reason I made that decision that didn't feel like me, like if I say someone invites me somewhere and I say no, but inside I'm going, yes, of course I want to go. You know what I mean? Something like that. Yeah. Like you see Violet doing that in film, she's like, nah, I don't want to go. And then, the handwriting, her deepest desire is like, take me with you. Yeah, I want to go. So I didn't know that you could actually become an instinct-based person after being a fear-based person. And then I met some people that were like, oh yeah, I used to be like you. And I was like, really? Like, and then so once I, kind of did some of the things they said they did, and it worked. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. So every day I endeavor to become more and more myself, and, eventually be completely confident and not make any decisions based in fear. That's my goal. That's my life goal.
I think this is very common for pretty much all of us, particularly as we get a little older. Like the film says, for example, it ultimately asks the audience, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And it made me think, like, if I could say something to my younger self, it would be that. Like, it would just be, don't be afraid, just be you and just overcome that fear and do what you want to do. And so you've written about stuff like this in your books. The most recent one, Face, 1 Square Foot of Skin, kind of talks about, aging gracefully and being yourself. And so why is this ultimately so important to you? Is it because you felt like you were held back for so long over the last few decades?
Yeah, it's partly that, so Violet is partly a revenge film against that fear because it stole time from me, right?
Yeah.
But that's a good question. Why am I making these points in these books and this film? I guess because I think if people, if fear is not a component, then people can truly become themselves. And I feel like when everybody's really, truly themselves, I think this would be heaven on earth. I think people individually would feel completely fulfilled. I think we all then, we then benefit from somebody being completely fulfilled. So if I'm being completely myself, I'm feeling completely fulfilled myself, and I'm more of a benefit to society because I'm bringing my true gifts and talents to a society instead of trying to do something I'm not supposed to be doing right now. professionally or personally. I mean, when you don't have fear, it eliminates a lot of behavior that we see that results from being afraid.
Yeah,
Selfishness, ego, power plays, all these kinds of things.
that's right. And a complete lack of
Treatment of
empathy.
others.
Yeah. There's a great scene in the film actually, which really, to me, it was the most visceral demonstration of this, and that's a scene in the meeting room with Tom, played beautifully by Dennis Blitzer.
Yeah.
So this is Violet's boss, and he's passively aggressively eviscerating her, and then it just gets less passive and more non-passive, and the editing is uneasy, the music's uneasy, and I think we've all been in situations like that. We're expected to keep it together or snap out of it. I found it really horrifying and recognizable. What was the key, as the director, that you had for Olivia to make her feel so suffocated, and yet on the surface she was fine?
Well, of course, a lot of that goes to Olivia. She did a great job, but that's just one of those situations where of course, I made what he's saying not so subtle, but a lot of times that character and the character of her brother, played by Todd Stashwick, who also does a great job.
Yeah.
That last speech, I love what he says, I know what this is you,
Oh, mate.
You doing what you want. But those two characters are an example of, people we all have in our lives who are, okay, you have these negative thoughts in the film we're calling The Voice, where it says a negative thought to you, like you're not good at math or something. And then you hear that come out of somebody else's mouth, almost in exactly the same way. And you're like, well, that's weird. How did it's like they're tuned into the same radio station. And what happens in our minds, I've found, is that your negative thoughts will point to that and say, well, see, that's confirmation that you're not good at math. See, done. You're not good at math. And then you believe that, and then it just becomes part of your personality until one day you're doing a math problem and you go, wait, I'm good at this. Why did I? So what I'm illustrating in there is like Tom and Tom Gaines, her boss, and Todd, not Todd, but Rick, her brother, are also being harassed by their own negative thoughts. In order to get out of that feeling of discomfort, they strike out at someone else. In other words, your negative thoughts are a lie, and so are their negative thoughts. So you're hearing two lies. You're not hearing confirmation of the truth. So the reason the camera's on him for so long, Tom Gaines, when he's going through that, is to show that, like, he wanted to go over the casting and he was excited about that. And then that laptop was shut and he was shut out. I mean, he assumes this, right? He's shut out. He feels like, she knows what she's doing and he doesn't, and he never gets any praise, even though he tries. I mean, why can't somebody notice him for a while? And then he just devolves into this place where he doesn't see any escape except to just attack her. And that's what other people are doing to you. And all we need to do then is go, oh, this isn't about me. This is about, you're being attacked by the voice right now. You're being attacked by your own negative thoughts right now. And I hope you can find a way out of that. But you're not telling me about me right now. You're just telling me how you're feeling right now about yourself.
I think we all really need to lean into that. Like, that's very emotionally intelligent perspective. A lot of us don't have that, or building towards that. And it's so true. So much of this is projection from other people, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll see the film and then they'll.
Let's hope so. I'm doing my best. What also fascinates me is there's a bit of a dynamic in this film between men and women. Violet's inner voice is a man, played beautifully by Justin, one of my favorite actors. He calls her a fat pig or a fat or a pig or whatever. Why did you go with a man and not a woman for the inner voice?
Well, the thing that made the biggest difference for me when I was transitioning from a fear-based life to an instinct-based life was reacting to these negative thoughts as if somebody else was saying them to me, just as an experiment. What if Rob was saying these things to me? Like the example I use is don't wear that shirt to the party or no one's going to talk to you. So within myself, I give it a lot of validity and I change my shirt. But the more I do that, the further away I get from being my true self. But if you were to have said it to me, I would ask questions. Maybe I'd say, well, what do you mean? Is there a dress code or do you know the hosts? I mean, right? I wouldn't immediately absorb it as fact. So because that helped me so much to get perspective on these negative thoughts and see them objectively and see that they're lies, I wanted to do that for the audience. So I wanted the voice to be as different from Olivia's as possible, so that that would maybe set up in their own minds, like, you know, what if someone else was saying this to me? How would I react to it then?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I like that. It's so true. You kind of put a bit of weight on it. If it's not your own, you think, oh, that's just my crazy inner voice. But if it's another voice, particularly, you know, if you're a woman and it's a man's voice, then maybe she has to, maybe it is so slightly threatening and holds some validity and weight. I don't know. There's so much to think about in this movie. We could be here all day, so I have to try to wrap things up. So the other thing I love that you've done in this film is the use of this really ambitious aesthetic. So as you mentioned, you use on-screen text. To me, that highlights Violet's moods or emotions, her inner desire. The jarring use of subliminal images, like really disturbing stuff that kind of pops up on the screen, it makes you feel uneasy. And then when her anxiety spirals out of control, the frame saturates into this searing, I assume, violet color. Why did you decide to amplify this story with these visual cues?
I mean, more than anything, I wanted this to be an immersive experience for the viewer so that they can go in and experience it yourself. Like the reaction your wife had, you know, she was, I'm assuming, able to go in and experience it herself, like getting into a car and taking a ride or putting on a coat and wearing that all day. So that's what was most important to me, the character of the viewer going through this. So I used as many visual and audio elements to create that immersive experience. I didn't want it to be the audience just watching an actress going through these experiences. I really wanted to cut the experience open and then put you in it, you know, so have it around you. Like how can I visually represent or audibly represent X, you know, when somebody feels like, oh my God, I can't take it. You know, my negative thoughts are saying something and this person is talking to me also, and I can't, and I have to numb out kind of, and then just let whatever the negative thoughts are just come out of my mouth. What would that look like?
Yeah.
You know, so that's why it goes red and and you hear that sort of drone sound kind of come in, because she's just, at that moment, like the only way she can hold it together is if she sort of zones out and just lets the negative thoughts speak for her. And then, she just wants to get on the other side of this moment.
So. I've had some experience with anxiety, and there's not a lot of films or series that are really effective in depicting that. I think you really nailed it here. It just was very recognizable to me. Also, one of Violet's inner desires, she says it quite often, or she writes it quite often, is "don't leave." I think that's quite intentional on your part. I don't think that's a throwaway line. To me, "don't leave" is something that many of us say. We don't say it. We would love that person not to leave, but we act nonchalant. We have to be cool, calm, collected. Why were you going for that? Because that actually was quite visceral as well. So simple and yet so visceral.
Thank you. Yeah. These are good questions, Rob. To say "don't leave" is like, I mean, yeah, we do it a lot. We do it a lot in romantic relationships, pushing people away.
Yeah.
Pushing. But really, like, oh my God, don't go. Don't leave this, you know, or with that job offer, you know, don't listen to what I'm saying, you know? And I think that's, you know, she's making fear-based decisions. She's making fear-based decisions instead of doing what she really wants to do. And the risk we run when we say what we really want to say or do what we really want to do, or wear what we really want to wear, have the relationships we really want to have, we risk rejection, and we risk being sort of shuttled to the side in the tribe too. And so I think for a lot of people, their biggest fear, for most people, their biggest fear, I think, is complete isolation, because on a tribal level, that means you don't have any resources. And then what happens if you don't have any resources, then you'll die. But I think in knowing that, if that's in our DNA as humans, right, we want to survive, right? But I think in knowing that, it enables us to tell ourselves, hey, if I wear that shirt to the party, and if my fear is saying no one will talk to you, and if the end of that, the link of thoughts, like at the end of the film, right, the last thread is like, well, you'll die. And then you can say, okay, I hear that. I hear why my system would want me to change that shirt. But my rational mind, do I really think I'm going to die if I wear that shirt? Let's go find out.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it helps to like, and that was also a big difference for me. Like she does at the tire store. Let's go find out.
Yeah, so true. And finally, about the film, before I ask you one final question, is the other major trigger in this film is family, and how a lot of family can be pretty awful. And it just goes to show how your childhood and your upbringing, family relationships so profoundly inform who you are. Why did you decide to go down that path in this film? Because that's a whole other dimension that is also very recognizable.
Yeah. I mean, I could have done school teachers instead, or friends at school. But I brought that in because it does kind of go under your skin, you know, when you're growing up, you know, things that family say. And also I wanted to highlight how sometimes our negative thoughts can just be a repetition of what somebody else has said to us. And then we take it. I mean, if we had more time, I'd go into like why I think we grab onto it so firmly in our childhood versus when we're older. But yeah, and then it just becomes, we repeat it then to ourselves so much that we just begin to think that that's part of our personality. And it's not at all, you know, it's an interesting thing to unwind. I mean, one thing I didn't touch on that much in the film is I touch on it a bit, but in making these changes and going against things like that you've repeated yourself so many years, can feel like you're just jumping off a cliff. Like you just feel like you're breaking rules that you shouldn't be breaking. You know, and your negative thoughts are going to start saying like, you're going crazy now. You're doing something that's crazy. You shouldn't do this. Stop it. You know, like it does. Yeah. But I found that to be a really interesting feeling, that just, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's so true. It's really, really true. There's so much to unpack in this film. Anyone who hasn't seen it yet, I really highly recommend it if you want to get an insight into how those of us who deal with anxiety or who make fear-based decisions, and I think that's probably most of us, feel. My final question, though, is not about Violet. And I have to ask it because, you know, Gold Derby and we care about this stuff. You came of age on our TV screens playing Mallory Keaton in Family Ties. And you scored 2 Emmy nominations in 86 and 87. It feels like such a long time ago, and it kind of doesn't at the same time. Like I'm looking at you now and I feel like I'm a kid again and I'm watching my favorite show on TV. Do you look back at that stage of your life like really fondly? What's your highlight memory from that stage of your life?
I'll tell you what, and I go into this in my book Fame, which is the first book I wrote. I'm glad to have been famous then, but versus now. Wow. I'm glad to have been famous when not everyone had a camera in their pocket or a recording device. I think my best memory then is my best memory now, just working with really talented people on really quality material, even if it's my own quality material. Yeah. And I, you know, being a director, writer, director, producer is so fits so well for me. It feels so right. It feels like everything I've done up to now was just prep for now. So all my experiences in the business up to now just like informs how I'm doing this work. And I just want to, all the filmmakers of the 60s and 70s, European filmmakers of the 60s and 70s, and American too, of course, are a big influence on me. And I kind of grew up watching all those films, and I just I want to see where, one of the reasons that this film has so many elements in it is I want to see where I can take filmmaking as a writer director, with the structure of the script, with the elements I'm bringing into the film. How can I intensify the emotional engagement for the audience, things like that. So it's I'm really excited about the rest of my career now as a writer, director, producer.
I am too. I'm looking behind you. It says a Justine Bateman film. I hope we get to see more of those.
I'm ready. I have tons more
Ready.
scripts. It's just you like get back to, you're like, oh, okay, now to square one again, and you raise the money and get it together. And that's where I'm at again. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, congrats on Violet. I really enjoyed it. It was also slightly hard to watch in a good way. You made me think, and congrats on that. And I look forward to more, Justine. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. So nice to talk to you, Rob.